Jesus never existed. He is a fictionary character invented by early Christian propagandists for their literary goals and political agendas. The New Testament has no historical value, and there are no non-Christian references to Jesus Christ from the first century, nor during the years he was alleged to exist. There is not even a single record kept from the Romans about the trial and execution of such a man, despite the fact that the Romans at the time kept numerous records of their atrocities over the Jews. The Gospels were written decades after his alleged death by people who never claimed to be eyewitnesses, thus making it convenient for Christian propagandists to change details from historical accuracy, as they were eager to create a mascot for their nearly developed pagan religion in their attempts for political control. It must also be considered that the writers of the Gospels show no first-hand understanding of the social situations of Jerusalem, given some of their historical inaccuracies. They are clearly foreigners removed from both in space and time from the events they alleged. All written accounts of Jesus' life are hearsay, derived from other people rather than eyewitnesses. Courts of law do not allow hearsay as testimony, and nor does honest modern scholarship. Hearsay does not provide good evidence, and therefore we should dismiss it and the writings that allege any accounts of Jesus Christ. No single non-religiously biased record can conclude that there was a historical Jesus, and if there was one, close to nothing can be known about him. Tacitus was born in the year 56 CE, so he couldn't have been an eyewitness of Jesus Christ either. He lived during a time period in which Christians already believed in Jesus, so he could have either gotten his information from what other Christians told him, which would not be a reliable source because, of course, Christians out of everyone will support the idea that Jesus existed, or his writings were forged or edited later by Christian apologists in order to match with the status quo of a later Christian-dominated society. It is sometimes claimed that the miraculous spread of Christianity in the early Roman Empire is evidence of a historical Jesus. That such a movement could not have gone so far so fast had there not been a real person at its inception. A similar argument could be made, however, in the case of the earlier rapid spread of Mithraism. I am unaware of any Christian apologist who would argue that this supports the idea of a historical Mithra. No non-Christian writer has ever made note of the disciples or apostles, increasing the embarrassment from the silence of history concerning the foundation of Christianity. Jewish observers of Christianity didn't talk about Jesus until the Middle Ages. So, whatever Jewish people were saying about Jesus during the time he was supposed to exist, we don't get to hear. The earliest actual Jewish record of Christianity in the Talmud reports that Jesus lived 100 years before the Gospels claim and was executed by Jews and by stoning before Romans were even in the country. So there is a problem with the Talmud being a reliable non-Christian source, to say the least. By the time the Talmud was written, Jewish people did not have any means of knowing any more than Christians whether there had been a Jesus or not. Most of their own documents were edited later by Christians anyway. Josephus was born in 37 CE, so he wasn't an eyewitness either. There's evidence that his texts were interpolated by Christian apologists. Not a single writer before the 4th century, not Justin, Irenaeus, Clement of Alexandria, Tertullian, Cyprian, Arnobius, in all their defenses against pagan hostility, made a single reference to Josephus' words. Josephus spent half his entire life discrediting Christian apologists, but in a mere 100 words, he contradicts himself by randomly summing up the miracles of Jesus and claims them as fact? Many scholars agree that his texts have been interpolated by Christians in later years, hence why any mentioning of Jesus is abrupt and off topic from the prior and following paragraphs. Therefore, I have to say that these non-Christian sources don't hold much substance in the matter. There are claims that there are physical relics of Jesus. I'd never put it past early Christians or modern Christians to lie and create hoax relics. It's extremely beneficial for religions to concoct falsehoods and deceits merely to advance themselves in their designs. There were at least 26 authentic burial shrouds scattered throughout Europe, the Shroud of Turin being just one of them, already proven fake with radiocarbon dating. And since we don't have the alleged foreskin to carbon date and confirm the time period in which it came from, we have to find other solid proofs to support his existence, which there currently isn't any. Taylor McDaniel, the University of Oxford, and the University of Arizona, and the University of Irvine did a study on the Shroud of Turin with a chemical analysis and radiocarbon dating and found that it dates back to 13th to 14th centuries, which unfortunately is too recent to connect to Jesus. It's fabricated material. The Dead Sea Scrolls are also not proof of Jesus' existence. The Dead Sea Scrolls, which were discovered from 1946 and 1956 in the Qumran caves near the Dead Sea, primarily contain Jewish texts, including portions of the Hebrew Bible, and date from the 3rd century BCE to the 1st century CE. The Dead Sea Scrolls have no direct mention of Jesus. They do not contain any references to Jesus or the events of his life. They mainly deal with Jewish religious laws, community practices, and eschatological themes. Since the scrolls were written before or around the time Jesus is believed to have lived, they don't provide historical evidence for him. The community that produced the Dead Sea Scrolls, commonly believed to be the Essenes, followed a Jewish sectarian tradition and had no connection to early Christianity. While the Dead Sea Scrolls are valuable for understanding the religious and cultural context of the time period in which Jesus lived, they do not serve as direct evidence for his existence. Historical evidence for Jesus, as mentioned earlier, comes mainly from later sources like the New Testament and Roman historians. There's a stone bearing of Pontius Pilate which suggests he existed, but that doesn't mean Jesus existed. What's to say the New Testament didn't just borrow an actual historical figure to further validate their myth? Fictional media references real-life figures all the time. Why isn't there at least any record of an execution of such a man? The Romans weren't shy about their exploits over the Jews, as I stated before. The authenticity of the letters of Paul have been doubted for quite a few centuries. The dates they were written haven't stood the test of skeptical scrutiny by most scholars. None of the letters allude to Jesus' parents or his nativity. They never refer to Nazareth. They never indicate the time of his earthly presence. They don't refer to any Roman trial, and they don't mention any of his miracles, which is a striking omission. It is not a verifiable source. The story of Jesus Christ is not original. The narratives pertaining to being born of a deity, performing miracles, and resurrection after death are themes that have been played out in many Greek and pagan myths hundreds of years prior to Jesus. The story of Dionysus, Mithras, Sol Invictus, Osiris, Asclepius, Attis, and Adonis are perfect examples. It's evident that people merely borrowed these themes and applied it to Jesus for their own literary goals. It is true, however, that Sol Invictus came after the beginning of Christianity, but oddly, Jesus' narrative in text was not complete until the 3rd century or so after Sol Invictus, which means that it easily could have borrowed from its narrative. All accounts of martyred apostles, all of them, are thoroughly biased toward glorifying the subject and persuading the reader to have confidence and believe in Jesus. And by unknown authors using unknown sources, in fact, we cannot even establish that they were using sources at all. Not one eyewitness or even one contemporary source exists for any of the apostles. No archaeological findings, nothing, nor any neutral historical witnesses or even contemporaries, nor any critical historical account at all. What we have instead are the very worst and least reliable sources you could ever have for anything. The Gospels and the book of Acts, for example, which are riddled with contradictions and narratively trip over logic multiple times. I also think that we should take into account that if Jesus was real, he never would have been white. You see, in the Middle Ages, artists like Antonello da Messina and Albrecht Dürer were among the first to paint Jesus, but they were actually self-portraits. It was common practice for European artists to use themselves or people they knew as references when drawing another human or subject. Most men in the Middle Ages had long hair and shoulder-length beards. From the perspective of art history, this reinforced an already standardized image of a bearded Christ with shoulder-length dark hair. It soon became a trend for European artists to combine the icon and the portrait, making Jesus in their own likeness. This helped artists personify themselves with Jesus, identifying with the human suffering of Christ while also commenting on one's own creative power. If you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications for whenever I upload other videos. And if you have anything you want to add or challenge me on, feel free to do so in the comments. Have a great day.